Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Harigor Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinatha Sharma Kunda Radha Kunagiri Govardhan ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Mayapur Dham ki jai. Jagannath Puri ki jai. Ganga Mai ki jai. Jamuna Mai ki jai. Tulsi Maharani ki jai, Bhakti Devi ki jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So we're moving along on the second volume of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita by His Holiness Satsvarup Das Goswami. And today, halfway through the presentation, we'll be starting the 9th chapter. The 9th chapter is called Stay High Forever. It refers to intoxication. But for us it means stay high by becoming intoxicated by chanting the holy name. So far, in this volume, we've gone through Srila Prabhupada's journey to America, and then his short stay at Butler, Pennsylvania, the first testing ground. After that, Srila Prabhupada very courageously went alone to New York City. That chapter number 3 was Struggling Alone. And then Srila Prabhupada, having to take shelter of a Mayavadi sannyasi, he hoped to get assistance and support from India. So the next chapter is entitled, It Will Not Be Possible to Assist You. As much as he tried, nobody came forward to help Srila Prabhupada, either with men or with money. Then Srila Prabhupada, when he broke his dependence upon Dr. Mishra, the next chapter was Free to Preach, when he moved into his little room. And finally, Prabhupada made the big step. He moved to the Bowery, which was the most degenerate part of New York City. But amazingly, he was able to acquire some sincere students there. First, they were interested in just the music and the chanting. They wanted to learn Sanskrit. They brought their musical instruments. And then finally, by the arrangement of the Supreme Lord, Prabhupada moved to 26 2nd Avenue. That chapter was called Breaking Ground, when Prabhupada was able to establish the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Next comes Planting the Seed. So that's the chapter that we're going to finish today, because in this chapter of Planting the Seed, Srila Prabhupada, he makes his first initiation ceremony on his Vyasa Puja day, the day after Janmashtami. He initiates his first 11 disciples. And now, today, we'll be starting later, halfway through, the Stay High Forever. And as we read on, we'll understand why that chapter is called that. So last week, we read how Prabhupada inaugurated the initiation ceremony. It was the first time the devotees had ever seen a fire sacrifice. It was the first time they heard what their vows would be for life. It was the first time they chanted japa. They had to string their own beads. Everything was new and exciting. And then 2 days later, Srila Prabhupada held the first marriage ceremony. Prabhupada encouraged Mukunda and Janaki, their new names. They were just learning how to call each other by their new names. He wanted them to get married if they were going to live together. And now Prabhupada will show them what a Vedic marriage is. Prabhupada directed Mukunda and Janaki to sit opposite him on the other side of the sacrificial fire arena. And just as at the initiation, he lit the incense and instructed them in the purification by water, reciting the purification mantra, and then began to speak. So you remember last week, Om Pavitra Pavitra Va, whether one is pure or impure. So that mantra was sung also, and Prabhupada taught the devotees how to do the Achman 3 times, then throw the water away. So gradually they were learning these small processes of purification by following Prabhupada's instructions. He explained about the relationship between man and wife in Krishna consciousness, and how they should serve each other, and how they should serve Krishna. Prabhupada then asked Janaki's sister to present her formally to Mukunda as his wife. Mukunda then repeated after Swamiji. Of course, this is all done in English. Nowadays, we know how to do the sanskars in Sanskrit. They're a lot more elaborate. But because of Prabhupada's audience and the lack of knowledge of the devotees who were taking part in this, everything was done in English. I accept Janaki as my wife, and I shall take charge of her throughout both of our lives. We shall live together peacefully in Krishna consciousness, and there will never be any separation. And then Prabhupada turned to Janaki. Will you accept Sriman Mukunda Das Brahmachari as your life's companion? Will you serve him always and help him to execute his Krishna consciousness? And then Janaki replied, yes, I accept Mukunda as my husband throughout my life. There shall never be any separation between us, either in happiness or distress. I shall serve him always, and we shall live together peacefully in Krishna consciousness. So this was the practice of the Krishna conscious marriage system. Those of us who had the opportunity to be blessed by Srila Prabhupada in our marriages, the marriage ceremonies were very simple. It was the first time we had some type of fancy saris, and there weren't many devotees. If the family members were agreeable, and if they were favorable, then they would attend. Otherwise, we would have the family of the devotees attending the program. A nice feast would be made. And Prabhupada would ask, he would say, if she is agreeable, then I give my blessings for the marriage. So never was there a time when it was enforced upon us that we had to get married. It was always by free choice, because we were going to take vows. The vows were for life. There shall never be any separation. But after some few years, although the next big marriage ceremony that Prabhupada performed would be in Boston, we'll read about that later. He did a Maha marriage yagya, about 4 different couples. And gradually Prabhupada saw that the Western girls and boys, even though they took their vows, they were not able to follow them completely. So at one point, Srila Prabhupada stopped giving his acceptance and his blessings for the marriages. He would say, at your own risk, because the devotees just were not able to follow the principles as strictly as they had vowed to do. Back at his apartment, Prabhupada, along with a few we missed. Here. Okay. No one knew anything of what was going on except Swamiji. He led the chanting, he gave the lines for the bride and groom to exchange, he told them where to sit and what to do. He, in fact, had told them to get married. He had also cooked the elaborate feast that was waiting in the kitchen for the completion of the ceremony. Prabhupada asked Mukunda and Janaki to exchange their flower garlands, and after that to exchange sitting places. He then asked Mukunda to rub some vermilion down the part in Janaki's hair, and then to cover her head with her sari. Next came the fire sacrifice, and finally the feast. So there's a symbolism to the sindhu that's put in the part of the hair. And that is previously, as we read in Krishna's pastimes, particularly with the Kshatriyas, there would be a fight. There would be a Swayamvara where the woman would choose her husband, but then those suitors who were not chosen, they would challenge the prospective groom, and he would have to fight them off. And he would take the blood of the conquered kings and put that in the hair as proof of victory. So that's why the red is there. So now, for the first time, the girls were learning how to cover their head after marriage. And all of these things, of course, all of the rituals are quite different in the dharmas in the Western countries. But basically, marriage is a commitment, husband and the wife. And Srila Prabhupada also described that a marriage without children is like a desert. And if you have a nice wife, or if you have a nice mother, then there's no reason to go to the forest. So Prabhupada eventually was teaching us all of these Vedic principles. And now after this ceremony and the fire sacrifice, the special feature of the wedding was the big feast. It turned out to be quite a social success. The guests ate enthusiastically, asked for more, and raved about the sensational tastes. Prabhupada's followers, who were accustomed to the simple daily fare of rice, dal, sabji, and chapatis, found the feast intoxicating and ate as much as they could get. Many of Mukunda's friends were macrobiotic followers, and at first they fastidiously avoided all the sweets. But gradually the enthusiasm of the others wore down their resistance, and they became captivated by the Swami's expert cooking. God, he's a good cook, said Janaki. So eventually Janaki, and particularly Jamuna, took this cooking very seriously, and they learned this art of vegetarian cuisine. We had our first blue little cookbook, the Harekrishna cookbook, and then Jamuna took it to the highest level, the masterpiece of the art of Indian vegetarian cuisine. You can find it in Prabhupada's library. It was such a well-written book, well-tested, everything according to Western standards, because it was to teach the Westerners how to live and cook according to Vedic vegetarian principles. It even was awarded different prizes for the best cookbook, things like that. So it was a great success. Bruce would become Brahmananda in 2 weeks, who had missed the first initiation, was seeing the Vedic fire sacrifice and tasting the Swami's kichoris for the first time. He resolved on the spot to dedicate himself to Krishna consciousness and become one of the Swamiji's disciples as soon as possible. Almost all the visitors personally approached Swamiji to thank him and congratulate him. He was happy and said it was all Krishna's blessings, Krishna's grace. So we can remember from last week that Prabhupada had taught Jamuna to make these kachuris, and he made potato kachuris. Here we have all different kinds of kachuris, particularly urad, or besan, or matar. But Prabhupada chose that day to make potato kachuris, and they hooked Bruce. He decided to dedicate his life to Krishna after he had the kachuris. After the ceremony, Mukunda and his wife entertained many of the devotees and guests in their apartment. The evening had put everyone in high spirits, and Hayagriva was reciting poetry. Then someone turned on the television to catch the scheduled interview with Allen Ginsberg, the poet, and much to everyone's happiness, Allen began playing harmonium and chanting Hare Krishna. He even said there was a Swami on the Lower East Side who was teaching this mantra yoga. Krishna consciousness was new and unheard of. Yet now the devotees were seeing a famous celebrity perform kirtan on television. The whole evening seemed auspicious. So Allen Ginsberg, he was a beat. Beat means the beat generation, the counterculture figurehead. He was a poet, and he was very much involved in all types of experimental lifestyle. We'll read about that as we go on in this Stay High Forever chapter. So here we have, whenever he would have his poetry readings or his be-ins at different parks and universities, he would start off with the chanting of Hare Krishna. And he was doing this even before he met Srila Prabhupada, because he had come to India, he had attended the Kumbh Mela, and there he heard the chanting of Hare Krishna. And then when he went to Calcutta, he again heard the chanting of Hare Krishna. He picked up kartals there, he got a harmonium, and he didn't know that there was a whole culture behind the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra of Vaishnavism, of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, but he was attracted to the mantra. And he brought this mantra to America and the other countries that he visited, and he would start all of his programs with the particular tune that he learned in India, chanting Hare Krishna either with his kartals or with his harmonium. Back at his apartment, Prabhupada, along with a few helpers, cleaned up after the ceremony. He was satisfied. He was introducing some of the major elements of his Krishna consciousness mission. He had initiated disciples, he had married them, and he had feasted the public with Krishna prasadam. Quote, "If I had the means," he told his followers, "I could hold a major festival like this every day." So we hear in Vrindavan, and we experience it, that in Vrindavan every day is a festival. We have so much delectable Mahaprasadam, sumptuous, succulent, sufficient. We can feed unlimited number of people for free. And this was Prabhupada's dream, and that dream now has come true in most of his ISKCON temples around the world. He wrote a letter to all the temples in the 1970s. He said, "You always have to keep ready prasadam, so that anyone who comes to the temple, you can feed the prasadam." So there would be puris, pakoras, and halava for any guests that came. And he said, at the end of the day, whatever's left over, then the devotees can have it. And when this Sunday feast really took off at all the temples, well, of course, the whole week we would go out on Sankirtan, hand out invitation cards with the Maha Mantra, the timings of the feast. But not only were the newcomers enjoying the feast, but the devotees, they would enjoy the feast very much also, because most of the week they would just have rice, dal, chapati, and sabji. But on Sundays, there would be a wet sabji, a dry sabji, a chutney, puris, sweet, so many special things. At least 5 to 7 things would be every Sunday at the Sunday feast. Now we start chapter 9, entitled, Stay High Forever. But while this was a quotation, because Prabhupada was getting some publicity. He was making waves there on the Lower East Side. The young people, they were stopping their taking of intoxications. They were coming regularly to the Bhagavad-Gita readings. They were getting up early in the morning to attend Prabhupada's Srimad Bhagavatam classes. So this was catching on in the Lower East Side. So the main newspaper there, called the East Village Other, we're in September now. This was written in October, just a few days later. But while this was going on, an old man, 1 year past his allotted 70. So here, like we have in Bengali, we have kulia. How do you say 20? Kuri. Yes, so kuri. So in Victorian English, 20 is called a score. So 3 score means 3 times 20, 60, plus 10. So Prabhupada was 70 years old at this time. Wandered into New York's East Village and set about to prove to the world that he knew where God could be found. In only 3 months, the man, Swami A.C. Bhaktivedanta, succeeded in convincing the world's toughest audience, bohemians, acid heads, potheads, and hippies. Now, bohemians means the beat artists. Bohemians means they used to be called beatniks or bohemians. The counterculture, the people who were not following mainstream American culture, who came, they specifically came to Greenwich Village and the Lower East Side to live. Acid heads, that means people who were taking LSD, the hallucinogenic drug. Potheads, but all these words is part of our hippie vocabulary that we grew up with, so I have to translate it for all of you pure souls. Potheads means the colloquial for marijuana or charas is called pot. So potheads means people who would take marijuana, smoke marijuana and charas and hashish and all those things. They were called potheads. And hippies. Hippies means, Prabhupada turned the hippies into happies. That he knew the way to God. Turn off, sing out, and fall in. This new brand of holy man, with all due deference to Dr. Leary, now this turn off, that means, see, Dr. Leary would say, turn on, tune in, drop out. That was Dr. Leary's and the hippies' motto. Turn on means take intoxication. Tune in, that means have your mystical experiences while you're intoxicated. And then drop out. That means drop out of society, drop out of school, drop out of all of the materialistic lifestyle. Turn on, tune in, drop out. But this writer, he said Prabhupada's motto was turn off, that means stop taking drugs, sing out, and fall in. Fall in line means chant harekrishna and attend the temple there. This new brand of holy man, with all due deference to Dr. Leary. Now, it was Dr. Leary who popularized the taking of LSD, this acid, which was a hallucinogenic drug, artificial. But it opened up the consciousness so that you could see all types of sparkling colors, and you could see things that in a normal condition you weren't able to see. Hallucinogenic. Has come forth with the brand of consciousness expansion that's sweeter than acid, cheaper than pot. Everybody knows these words now, acid, pot, right? And non-combustible by fuzz. Now that's a new one. What is fuzz? Fuzz means the police. And the police used to come and bust the people. Bust means they would come, they would catch these young people taking drugs and arrest them and throw them into jail. And the jail sentences were very long. Sometimes you would get 55 years if you were what they're called, the kingpin. If you were a kingpin means that you were in charge of all of the distribution of these illicit drugs in a particular area. You would get thrown in jail for life, because the police, the fuzz, would bust you. You understand now? This is all hippie jargon. Now you can all become hippies if you... How is all this possible? Through Krishna, the Swami says. Prabhupada's health was good that summer and fall, or so it seemed. He worked long and hard, and except for 4 hours of rest at night, he was always active. He would speak intensively, on and on, never tiring, and his voice was strong. His smiles were strong and charming. His singing voice loud and melodious. During kirtan, he would thump Bengali mridanga rhythms on his bongo drum, sometimes for an hour. He ate heartily of rice, dal, chapatis, and vegetables with ghee. His face was full and his belly protuberant. That means he had a bit of a belly. Sometimes, in a light mood, he would drum 2 fingers on his belly and say that the resonance affirmed his good health. His golden color had the radiance of youth and well-being preserved by 70 years of healthy, non-destructive habits. So here was a 70-year-old gentleman, a saintly person, who could outdo everything of these young men who were in their 20s. And of course, Satsrup Maharaj was the perfect person to write this because he was seeing all of this personally. So he was able to, just because he was an excellent writer, he could open up for us exactly what Prabhupada was doing, his condition at that time. Now here Prabhupada was sleeping 4 hours, but after some time, because of all of this nonstop, without any real rest, having to guide a whole family now of devotees, he had a stroke. Now after the stroke, he could not sleep properly because there was a constant ringing in his ears. And even now, I mean, even when Prabhupada lived here many years later, let's say, it's 1966 now, 76, okay, 10, 12 years later, Prabhupada wasn't able to sleep more than an hour and a half or 2 every night. It wasn't artificial. Like we hear that the 6 Goswamis, they were able to reduce their eating and sleeping. No, for health reasons, Prabhupada could not sleep a long time. So therefore, just this door here, you can go into Prabhupada's room. He had a room here. He would spend the night translating his Srimad Bhagavatam because he wasn't able to sleep. So it was the best time for Prabhupada. When he smiled, virility and vitality came on so strong as to embarrass a faded, dissolute New Yorker. Now, a faded, dissolute New Yorker, because the youth of America engaged so much in sense gratification, all the 4 principles. They had lost their vitality, they had lost their virility, and Prabhupada outdone them, although he was 3 times their age. In many ways, he was not at all like an old man, and his new followers completely accepted his active youthfulness as a part of the wonder of Swamiji, just as they had come to accept the wonder of the chanting and the wonder of Krishna. Swamiji wasn't an ordinary man. He was spiritual. He could do anything. None of his followers dared advise him to slow down, nor did it ever really occur to them that he needed such protection. They were busy just trying to keep up with him. During the 2 months at 26 2nd Avenue, because he moved in July, and now it's September, he had achieved what had formerly been only a dream. He now had a temple, a duly registered society, full freedom to preach, and a band of initiated disciples. When a godbrother had written asking him how he would manage a temple in New York, Prabhupada had said that he would need men from India, but that he might find an American or 2 who could help. That had been last winter. Now Krishna had put him in a different situation. He had received no help from his godbrothers, no big nations from Indian business magnates, and no assistance from the Indian government. But he was finding success in a different way. These were happy days. And Satsrup Maharaj very often, because many of his poems, and his books reflect these happy days with Srila Prabhupada, because they never expected that Prabhupada would leave 26 Second Avenue. They thought Prabhupada would stay with them forever there. But it wasn't like that. Prabhupada had the whole world to conquer. So happy days. The devotees thought it was happy days, and Prabhupada also called it happy days. He would say, those were happy days, he said. He had struggled alone for a year, but then Krishna sent me men and money. Yes, these were happy days for Prabhupada, but his happiness was not like the happiness of an old man's sunset years, as he fades into the dim comforts of retirement. Prabhupada never retired. After he left his family life, that was when his real career started, as a devotee, as a disciple, to carry out the mission of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. No sunset years for Prabhupada. His was the happiness of youth, a time of blossoming, of new powers, a time when future hopes expand without limit. He was 71 years old because Prabhupada had that initiation on his birthday, on his Vyasa Puja day. He gave a lecture describing his relationship with his spiritual master on that day. So he had just turned 71. But in ambition, he was a courageous youth. He was like a young giant, just beginning to grow. He was happy because his preaching was taking hold, just as Lord Chaitanya had been happy when he had traveled alone to South India, spreading the chanting of Harekrishna. Prabhupada's happiness was that of a selfless servant of Krishna, to whom Krishna was sending candidates for devotional life. He was happy to place the seed of devotion within their hearts, and to train them in chanting Hare Krishna, hearing about Krishna, and working to spread Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada continued to accelerate. After the first initiations and the first marriage, he was eager for the next step. He was pleased by what he had, but he wanted to do more. So who can guess what the next step was going to be? We'll find out. It was the greed of the Vaishnava, not a greed to have sense gratification, but to take more and more for Krishna. He would go in like a needle and come out like a plow. Now this was also an expression that Prabhupada gave us when he came. His phase one of ISKCON was when Prabhupada went to the Western countries. That was what his spiritual master told him to do. But phase two was something that Prabhupada wanted to do. He wanted to bring Krishna consciousness back to India and make India Krishna conscious again. So he used the same expression, that we come in like a needle. He only came with 40 disciples. And now look at Krishna consciousness in India. We have about 800 centers here. And in all the colleges, universities, schools, we have Prabhupada's books. We have thousands upon thousands of devotees initiated here. One spiritual master, His Holiness Jayapataka Swami, over 50,000 disciples, thousands of disciples waiting in line to get initiated. So this was go in like a needle and come out like a plow. That is to say, from a small, seemingly insignificant beginning, he would expand his movement to tremendous proportions. At least that was his desire. He was not content with his newfound success and security at 26 Second Avenue, but was yearning to increase ISKCON as far as possible. This had always been his vision, and he had written it into the ISKCON Charter. To achieve real unity and peace in the world, within the members and humanity at large. So when Srila Prabhupada had to give his incorporation papers for the New York state to become a religious society, he, along with Stephen Goldsmith, the advocate, Stephen Goldsmith took the League of Devotees, which had 44 principles, and he condensed it into 7 major principles. The number 1 principle, to systematically propagate spiritual knowledge to society at large, and to educate all people in the techniques of spiritual life in order to check the imbalance of values in life and to achieve real unity and peace in the world. So then Prabhupada explained in his forthcoming purposes how this would be achieved by printing literature, by distributing books and periodicals, by establishing temples, by establishing farm communities. But the real purpose was to achieve real unity and peace in the world. He knew that once they tried it, this is Prabhupada's next step, they would love it. But it would only happen if he personally went with them. Washington Square Park was only half a mile away, maybe a little more. So Prabhupada would take walks around New York City. He was doing reconnaissance. He was seeing where could he expand his Sankirtan movement. And on the Lower East Side, the biggest and the busiest park is Washington Square Park. That is where we have our Rath Yatra every year in New York City. It comes 50 blocks from Central Park down to 8th Street, where Washington Square Park is. It's a beautiful park. And just where there's big arches, they have Jagannath Baladev and Subhadra there on a beautiful platform, and the whole park is taken over by the Rath Yatra. So it wasn't Tompkins Square Park that Prabhupada started Sankirtan. It was at this park, Washington Square Park. Rabindra Swarup was one of the first disciples, not the one that is now in ISKCON. This is the first Rabindra Swarup, who later became inactive in ISKCON. He never made a secret of what he was doing. He used to say, I want everybody to know what we are doing. Then one day, D-Day came. Now, who knows what D-Day is? These are all American expressions. D-Day, it was World War II, 1945, June 6th. And all of the Allied countries, France, England, Italy, all of the European countries and America, they had a secret plan that they were going to conquer the Axis that was the Nazis, the German, by secretly coming and having all of the countries together, joining together on that D-Day, and conquer the Germans on that day. And in France, there's a beach called Normandy. They all brought their troops together there. And no one knew what D meant. There was D-Day and there was H hour. So D just stands for D for day, and H stands H for hour. So Prabhupada, he had his D-Day. He was going to conquer the world on this day. Swamiji gathered his group together. He said, we are going to chant in Washington Square Park. Everybody was scared. You just don't go into a park and chant. It seemed like a weird thing to do. This is Rabindra Swarup speaking. But he assured us, saying, you won't be afraid when you start chanting. Krishna will help you. And so we trudged down to Washington Square Park, but we were very upset about it. Up until that time, we weren't exposing ourselves. I was upset about it, and I know that several other people were, to be making a public figure of yourself. While with Prabhupada leading, they set out on that fair Sunday morning, walking the city blocks from 2nd Avenue to Washington Square in the heart of Greenwich Village. And the way he looked, just by walking, he created a sensation. None of the boys had shaved heads or robes, but because of Swamiji, with his saffron robes, his white pointy shoes, and his shaved head held high, people were astonished. It wasn't like when he would go out alone. That brought nothing more than an occasional second glance. But today, with a group of young men hurrying to keep up with him as he headed through the city streets, obviously about to do something, he caused a stir. So you can imagine that in your mind. Prabhupada walking in the front and 10 or 12 boys walking behind him. They were scared, but they followed him just like ducks and the little ducklings. Tough guys and kids called out names, and others laughed and made sounds. A year ago in Butler, the Agarwals had been sure that Prabhupada had not come to America for followers. He didn't want to make any waves, Sally had thought, but now he was making waves, walking through the New York City streets, headed for the first public chanting in America, followed by his disciples. In the park, there were hundreds of people milling about, stylish, decadent, Greenwich villagers. What is the word decadent? It means decayed moral principles. That's what decadent means. It means they didn't follow moral principles. Visitors from other boroughs, tourists from other states and other lands, an amalgam of faces, nationalities, ages, and interests. It was the main place where people would go on a Sunday afternoon. The New York, NYU, New York University, was right there at Washington Square Park, and Greenwich Village was right there also. You just had to walk 1 or 2 blocks, and Lower East Side was also right there. So it's a beautiful park, fountains, you could swim in the park, you could walk around on the grass and the lawns and play music, anything you wanted. Be as decadent as you wanted to be. So this is where Prabhupada chose to have his first Sankirtan. As usual, someone was playing his guitar by the fountain. Boys and girls were sitting together and kissing. Some were throwing frisbees. Frisbees means it's a round, flat, like looks like a flying saucer. It's made out of plastic, and you throw it, and the other person catches it, and you throw it back, just like catch here. Some were playing drums or flutes or other instruments, and some were walking their dogs, talking, watching everything, wandering around. It was a typical day in the village. Prabhupada went to a patch of lawn where, despite a small sign that read, "Keep off the grass," many people were lounging. He sat down, and one by one his followers sat beside him. He took out his brass hand cymbals and sang the Maha Mantra, and his disciples responded, awkwardly at first, then stronger. It wasn't as bad as they had thought it would be. Jagannath was Janos, who later went to Montreal. It was a marvelous thing, a marvelous experience that Swamiji brought upon me, because it opened me up to a great deal, and I overcame a certain shyness, the first time to chant out in the middle of everything. A curious crowd gathered to watch, though no one joined in. Within a few minutes, 2 policemen moved in through the crowd. "Who's in charge here?" an officer asked roughly. The boys looked toward Prabhupada. "Didn't you see the sign?" an officer asked. Swamiji furrowed his brow and turned his eyes toward the sign. He got up and walked to the uncomfortably warm pavement and sat down again. And his followers straggled after to sit around him. Prabhupada continued the chanting for half an hour, and the crowd stood listening. A guru in America had never gone onto the streets before, and sung the names of God. After kirtan, he asked for a copy of the Srimad Bhagavatam and had Hayagriva read aloud from the preface. With clear articulation, Hayagriva read, "Disparity in the human society is due to the basic principle of a godless civilization. There is God, the Almighty One, from whom everything emanates, by whom everything is maintained, and in whom everything is merged to rest." The crowd was still. Afterward, the Swami and his followers walked back to the storefront, feeling elated and victorious. They had broken the American silence. So just behind Prabhupada here is Hayagriva. Hayagriva, we remember, he was an English professor in a university, in a college in Michigan. And later, he wrote two books. The first book is the Harekrishna Explosion, where Hayagriva describes the blooming of Krishna consciousness in America, how it exploded and became what we now have ISKCON today. So in that first book, he describes the years 1966 to 1969, because Hayagriva was right there, present. He could write this wonderful book. His second book was called Vrindavan Days. And that was when Prabhupada came back here. He came back in 1970, and then he had his first Kartik festival in 1972. So Hayagriva came as an English professor dressed in a suit and tie. And he came to stay with Srila Prabhupada when Prabhupada was at the Radha Damodar temple. And in that book, he describes all of the instructions Prabhupada gave him regarding the sanctity of the Dham of Vrindavan. Many wonderful instructions are in that book. Maybe in a few years we'll get there at the rate that we're going. But we have wonderful supplementary literature to add to the Prabhupada Lilamrita by the disciples who were with Prabhupada during these times. Allen Ginsberg lived nearby on East 10th Street. One day he received a peculiar invitation in the mail. Practice the transcendental sound vibration. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. This chanting will cleanse the dust from the mirror of the mind. International Society for Krishna Consciousness, meeting at 7 a.m. daily, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 7 p.m. You are cordially invited to come and bring your friends. Swamiji had asked the boys to distribute it around the neighborhood. So because Allen Ginsberg, they were down on 1st Street and 2nd Avenue, that's 26 2nd Avenue, he lived just 9 blocks away. So as the devotees fanned out to distribute this invitation, Allen Ginsberg happened to get one in his mailbox too. And he had already been chanting Hare Krishna with the harmonium and the kartals that he had brought from New York. So he was very surprised to receive this invitation, and he acted on it immediately. One evening, soon after he received the invitation, Allen Ginsberg and his roommate, Peter Orlovsky, arrived at the storefront in a Volkswagen minibus. Allen had been captivated by the Hare Krishna mantra several years before, when he had first encountered it at the Kumbh Mela festival in Allahabad, India, and he had been chanting it often ever since. The devotees were impressed to see the world-famous author of Howl. Howl was one of his most famous poems, a very decadent poem. Sometimes we read some of the poetry, but we won't read that in the precincts of this class. But if you want to read it, you'll find it on the internet, called Howl. And leading figure of the Beat generation enter their humble storefront. His advocation of free sex, marijuana, this is the decadent life in the village that he was the number one figurehead of. His advocation of free sex, marijuana, and LSD, his claims of drug-induced visions of spirituality in everyday sights, his political ideas, his exploration of insanity, revolt, and nakedness, and his attempts to create a harmony of like-minded souls, all were influential on the minds of American young people, especially those living on the Lower East Side. Although by middle-class standards he was scandalous and disheveled, he was in his own right a figure of world repute, more so than anyone who had ever come to the storefront before. So his poetry and his avant-garde lifestyle attracted many people to come and live on the Lower East Side and in Greenwich Village. Those of us who grew up on the East Coast, East Coast is where New York City, Washington, Boston, Philadelphia all are, we were very much influenced by what was going on at this time in Greenwich Village and the Lower East Side. And many youth did tune in, turn on, and drop out, and come to live in the village so that they could be a part of this big happening that was going on with this decadent life there. This here, he's wearing a sign, pot is fun. So everybody remember what pot is? Pot is, charas. What do you call it here in India?
Ganja.
Ganja, yes, ganja, right. Allen Ginsberg, here he is with his kartals at one of his be-ins. He would start his be-ins with the chanting of Hare Krishna. Bhaktivedanta seemed to have no friends in America, but was alone, totally alone, and gone somewhat like a lone hippie to the nearest refuge, the place where it was cheap enough to rent. That's the Lower East Side. There were a few people sitting cross-legged on the floor. I think most of them were Lower East Side hippies who had just wandered in off the street with beards and a curiosity and inquisitiveness and a respect for spiritual presentation of some kind. Some of them were sitting there with glazed eyes. Glazed eyes is what happens when you take these strong intoxicants. But most of them were just like gentle folk, bearded, hip, and curious. They were refugees from the middle class in the Lower East Side, looking exactly like the street sadhus in India. This is Allen Ginsberg when he was in India, making friends with the monkey there. Right. It was very similar, that phase in America of American underground history. And I liked immediately the idea that Swami Bhaktivedanta had chosen the Lower East Side of New York for his practice. He'd gone to the lower depths. He'd gone to a spot more like the side streets of Calcutta than any other place. So Calcutta, another name for Calcutta is the city of joy. You can find all kinds of things in Calcutta. So New York was like the Calcutta of India, of America. And Allen Ginsberg, he extolled Prabhupada for coming to where all these misguided youth were congregating and taking them out of their degraded life and uplifting them through the chanting of Hare Krishna and genuine spiritual knowledge, which they had never received before. Allen and Peter was Allen's roommate, his partner, had come for the kirtan. But it wasn't quite time. Prabhupada hadn't come down. They presented a new harmonium to the devotees. "It's for the kirtan," said Alan. "A little donation." Alan stood at the entrance to the storefront, talking with Hayagriva, telling him how he had been chanting Hare Krishna around the world, at peace marches, poetry readings, a procession in Prague. That Prague is in Czechoslovakia, right? Or is it in Australia? Czechoslovakia? Yes. No, in Czech, right? Right. A writers' union in Moscow. So he even chanted in Moscow the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. "Secular kirtan," said Alan, "but Hare Krishna nonetheless." Then Prabhupada entered. Alan and Peter sat with the congregation and joined in the kirtan. Alan played harmonium. Alan: "I was astounded that he'd come with the chanting, because it seemed like a reinforcement from India. I had been running around singing Hare Krishna, but had never understood exactly why or what it meant. But I was surprised to see that he had a different melody, because I thought the melody I knew was the melody, the universal melody. I'd gotten so used to my melody that actually the biggest difference I had with him was over the tune, because I'd solidified it in my mind for years, and to hear another tune actually blew my mind." I think that's all we have for tonight. So the entrance of Allen Ginsberg, this first visit, he was very helpful, very supportive of Srila Prabhupada, because he had already experienced the magic and the potency of the chanting of Hare Krishna. And now he had found a genuine guru who had brought this chanting of Hare Krishna for the first time now to America, and could actually explain why we chant Hare Krishna, who is Krishna, who is Ram. All of the questions could be answered. He didn't have those answers. He was just attracted to the chanting of Hare Krishna. That's how potent transcendental sound vibrations are. And now he had a guru, and he followed Prabhupada. When Prabhupada took off finally, just a few months after this, in January, he went to San Francisco. Allen Ginsberg went to San Francisco also and arranged for all the hippies to come and greet Prabhupada at the airport. When Prabhupada was having difficulty with his immigration status, Allen Ginsberg personally went to Washington and contacted a politician to help Srila Prabhupada so that he can get an extension in his visas. So behind the scenes, despite his lifestyle, which was completely antithesis to what Prabhupada was teaching, by the power of the holy name and his appreciation for Srila Prabhupada, he was able to do a great deal of service to assist Prabhupada in expanding the Hare Krishna movement all around the world. So that's all we have for tonight. Next week we're having the grand opening of the Srila Prabhupada Legacy Museum in Mayapur on February 18th. And we'll be showing in that Legacy Museum, we have all types of high-tech things. You can spend lifetimes in there watching all of the things about Srila Prabhupada and his legacy. And we have different displays of Prabhupada, all of his literary contributions in one room. And then in another room, we have the humble beginnings of how Srila Prabhupada began Krishna consciousness by establishing his first center in Mayapur, which he envisioned to be the world headquarters. So we have reconstructed the hut that Prabhupada used to live in, made out of chatai, and Prabhupada sitting there when Prabhupada initiated the distribution of prasadam to the thousands of Bangladeshi refugees who were coming across the border at that time to escape the genocide that was going on in Bangladesh. And then in the next room we have all of Prabhupada's personal paraphernalia, because perhaps some of you have noticed Prabhupada's disciples are disappearing at a quick rate. And many of Prabhupada's disciples had the personal paraphernalia of Srila Prabhupada. So devotees like Brajavilas, Jananivas, Sunanda, and others connected with the TOVP, they're traveling all around the world to beg the Prabhupada disciples and the temples that whatever paraphernalia you have as Srila Prabhupada, let us preserve it here in the TOVP, because the TOVP will be the most secure place. But we're all leaving the planet. What will happen to these treasures when we leave? So in that room are all of the things we've been able to collect in the last year. Prabhupada's cooker, Prabhupada's typewriter, Prabhupada's tape recorder, Prabhupada's dictaphone, so many sets of clothes, eating thalis made out of silver, all these Prabhupada's hair, just like we have here on a small scale at Prabhupada's home here. So you're all invited on February 18th to come to the grand opening of the Prabhupada Legacy Museum. If you can come for the grand opening, it'll be open then. It's not open to the public. It's on the Pujari floor of the TOVP. So it's a wonderful place to sit, chant with Prabhupada, hear his lectures, and bask in all of the wonderful contributions Prabhupada gave while he was here with us. All right, thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Jai.
You will be going, Grandma? You will be going?
I'm the curator.